Zappa. And with Tipper Gore, author of the book Raising PG Kids in an X-Rated Society.
This is ABC News Nightline, brought to you by AT&T.
Our best-known group was the Mothers of Invention, but in addition to his musical career, Frank Zappa has recently been an outspoken critic of a movement to require content ratings for LPs. Mr. Zappa, who is also entering the home video market with his own distribution company, is in our Los Angeles bureau this evening. And joining us in our Washington bureau is Tipper Gore. Along with her husband, Senator Albert Gore of Tennessee, she sat down to look at some of the new horror video movies recently and did not like what she saw. Frank Zappa, let me start with you. You're a father. Do you mind if your kids watch that stuff?
As a matter of fact, my two older children, Moon and Dweezil, have both seen Faces of Death. They rented it at a video store and brought it home. The net result was that after watching this video, they were so sickened by it, they both became vegetarians.
Well, all right, amusing, but obviously there can be, or do you feel there can be, negative effects to watching something like that?
Why do you say obviously? I don't think that that's been proven by anyone.
Tipper Gore?
Well, there have been a number of studies researching the viewing of television violence and subsequent aggressive behavior, particularly among children. Professor Neil Malmuth at the University of California, Edward Donnerstein, have researched sexual violence, sexual pornography, and they have concluded that it desensitizes attitudes towards rape victims, towards the act of rape itself, among college students who repeatedly see scenes of rape. The PTA conducted hearings in 1978 in which they detailed cases of more aggressive behavior among children that they felt the children were imitating violence that they saw on television. The American Psychological Association had a report out last September in which they say that viewing violence on television is directly linked to more aggressive behavior among children. So there really are a lot of studies that talk about the effects of viewing violence.
All right, Frank Zappa, a long list of studies, but Tipper used an interesting word.
But no conclusion.
She said desensitizes. When you see a young girl, as you saw a moment ago, who was standing, I guess, in a video rental store saying, I like the blood, what's your reaction to that?
Well, I think that the issue here may be desensitization rather than the content, because I think that there are a lot of things that people can see on television or in the movies that desensitize you. But the most desensitizing thing in the United States today is the Iran-Contra hearings, because that is desensitizing us to honesty, to the Constitution itself. That is an issue. This is nothing.
All right, Tipper, let me come back to Tipper Gore. Let me come back to that question of the studies and what it can do. What are you really going to advocate as a solution? Are you simply going to talk about as the woman did in the piece, talk about a different rating for these movies?
Well, that's not necessarily a bad idea to discuss it, because if these home video cassettes or the rental cassettes do not go through the MPAA system, they're not rated, and yet they're in the stores available to kids of any age. So I would like to see an industry initiative where the industry takes responsibility for providing consumer information to parents, to others who are concerned about sadistic, sexual, savage scenes in some of these movies, and the availability, the easy accessibility to young children. And I think the answer to that is consumer information.
But doesn't a rating just make them more enticing?
Well, they're already enticing. I mean, your show is about the immense appetite that's already been created among teenagers and even younger kids for these kind of movies. I think the question is parental awareness. I think the key is most parents are not aware that the contents are as graphic as they are. It's their foremost responsibility, but they need guidance from the industry. Therefore, I think voluntary ratings are very appropriate and a useful consumer tool.
Frank Zappa, you're about to go into the movie distribution business, I gather. If somebody brought it to you, would you distribute something called Splatter University?
No.
Why not?
Good for you.
Why not?
Well, it's not the style of stuff that is going to be on my label. I've started a label called Honker Home Video, which is providing state-of-the-art weirdness, but not that type of material.
Well, if you wouldn't distribute it, then you do have some objection to it.
It's not my idea of entertainment. And the thing that is on my label, the material that is on my label, is going to be things that would entertain me.
All right. Well, there's no question that these movies have become more popular. There are more of them. A recent phenomenon. We'll talk about why they've become such a phenomenon. When we come back, we'll be joined by one of America's best-known film critics, Gene Siskel of the Chicago Tribune. Television program Siskel and Ebert at the Movies. Gene Siskel, you're nice to join us this evening. We've gotten through a lot of years without these kinds of movies, and maybe I sort of suffer from terminal age at this point, but I mean, when I think back at Friday Fright Night at the movies, there was a vampire with a big black cape and whatever. But these things have obviously progressed a long way. Why do you think they have?
Well, it has progressed a long way. I think it takes a bigger shock to, once you've gotten used to a level of shock, even if it's electrical shock, it takes a bigger shock to get a jolt out of you mechanically in the body. And I think that's the way it works almost in films.
To follow that through to its conclusion, though, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse.
Yes, when you're showing I Spit on Your Grave, I sort of have to keep up to date with this stuff. That's the bad old days. Now it's Faces of Death. I used to say when I was asked what was the worst film of all time that I'd seen, it was I Spit on Your Grave. Now it's Faces of Death. And they've come out now with Faces of Death 3, which is a high renter. I just called a couple of video stores in Chicago half an hour ago before we went on the air, and Faces of Death 3 is renting quite well. So it is getting rougher. And those films, by the way, are not faked, as the magazine publisher, the young magazine publisher was talking about. Those are showing mutilations, accident footage that wouldn't go on broadcast network, showing morgue shots, killing, some of it tricked up, I might add, where there's a second camera there where you wouldn't think there would be a camera, showing a camera photographing a mutilation by alligator or bear or somebody falling from a building. So this stuff is getting rougher. There's no question about it.
Tipper Gore, the market is there. If the market is there, if people want to see them, there's really no way that you can stop that, is there?
Well, I don't advocate stopping that. What I'm concerned about are the number of rentals that are unrated and accessible to kids of any age, preteens and young adolescents. And I think parents need to make a judgment and intercede.
Fair comment. I didn't mean to say that you wanted to stop it. I'm just saying that when you talk about a rating or some sort of different warning for parents or whatever, basically, right, if the market is there, people are going to go and see them, whether you rate them, whether you put any kind of restriction on them, they're going to see them.
That's right. So the real key is education. I mean, this whole discussion should be framed in the argument of the real violence that's in our society. The fact is the youth homicide rate has gone up 232% since 1950. Last year in Detroit alone, one child a day, one kid under 21 a day was shot. I mean, we have a problem with violence in our country. We ought to debate it publicly. We ought to say, is it healthy to glorify violence the way that we do, to the degree, the graphic degree that we do? And is it healthy that women are always shown as the victim?
Frank Zappa, let me raise that question because a number of people do. One of the critics in the piece did, that it is a terrible problem for women, these movies, because they basically show an awful lot of aggression against women.
One of the reasons they do show aggression against women is because there is a market for films that show aggression against women.
Well, all right, Tipper, go ahead.
I think that is a matter of the marketplace right there, determining what it wants to see. Obviously, there is a sentiment in the American public that demands to see women being treated in this way.
Well, but
you're talking about a mental health problem, not a problem of labeling an object.
Well, it's a cheap industrial ingredient. I call it cultural strip mining. You're selling the bottom line of sex and violence to teens and preteens, and the companies ought to be responsible. And it's like junk food. They're crowding out other more positive kinds of films that they could produce.
Gene, aren't we down to the ultimate question that you always get into in this instance? I mean, it becomes a free speech question, and Frank Zappa has a point. If there is a market there for that kind of movie.
I think the key concept here is getting the information out. I think that the broadcast tonight, the ultimate good of it is simply to indicate to parents that it is not, you showed Friday the 13th. That isn't in the league that we're talking about here, that people are so concerned about. That's almost benign compared to some of the brutal material. Frank Zappa said a very interesting phrase. He said, it's not my idea of entertainment. Well, I think that the most damage that's done is not, let's say, a one-for-one act. I don't expect people to start going out and having toolbox murders after they see toolbox murders. But there is a confusion that I think does come up in the mind, and that is this, that in the name of entertainment, you watch a toolbox murder. In other words, it's labeled as fun, as a good time. And even Frank Zappa admits it's not his cup of entertainment. And I think from a cultural leader like Frank Zappa to say it's not his kind of entertainment is great to go across the national airwaves. It's not my cup of entertainment either.
But do you need to educate people on movies called Blood-Sucking Freaks? I mean, you see that title. It seems to me it's fairly self-evident what it is.
I talked to two store owners tonight, and they told me an amazing story, which is that they note ages and note on cards not to rent. Parents can call in and say, don't rent to my kids. They have had cases where parents have come back and said, you're not renting to my kids. I want them to see this. And I asked the young man that I talked to, the second guy, and I said, do you think he really knows, these parents know what's in the film? And he said, no. They think it's Friday the 13th. They think it's the old vampire stuff. They're really not aware how rough the material is.
All right, let me come back to that question of the responsibility of the video store owners, and we'll do that when we continue our discussion in a moment.
Good look at it.
Now, Frank Zappa, Tipper Gore, and Gene Siskel. Gene, in getting ready for this program tonight, we talked to some people who own chains of the video rental stores. Some of them said that they do make an effort to restrict the age of kids and what movies they take out. Is there any signs that they're doing that?
Yes, Blockbuster Video, which is a large chain which has monster stores of like 13,000 titles, and it's a national company, I think, run out of Texas. They have a coding system in the computer where a parent can call in and say, do not rent R-rated films to my child. I mean, milder stuff than we're talking about today. And a light will go off and they will not be able to rent to kids. So there's a chain.
Are they the exception or the rule?
Probably the exception, although the trend is toward bigger and bigger stores. There are plenty of mom and pop stores around, though, that are renting casually, and as I talked to tonight, some that are trying to rent responsibly.
Frank Zappa, your reaction to that? Stores limiting what kids can take, and the idea, perhaps, of putting a rating on a movie that would guide the store as to what they do.
Well, I think that the films that are in release on video cassette that are actual films that were in release in theaters already are rated. And that rating system itself has been pretty much of a dismal failure. The net result of it is to alert people that, you want to see the R because that's where the action is. I think that restricting any kind of access for any age group, for any kind of material in home video, which is the last frontier of free information in a pictorial sense, that where you can choose it, bring it into your home, and it doesn't have to be as bland as television. There shouldn't be anything to interfere with that.
Tipper Gore, in the last 30 seconds, do you see anything which points to an abatement of this phenomenon?
No, I don't. I think it's going to get worse. And I think what we have in the marketplace is something akin to video anarchy. And I think that what the consumer would really be best served by would be a voluntary system initiated within the industry to provide consistent information so people could make individual choices in the marketplace.
All right. Tipper Gore, Frank Zappa, Gene Siskel, thank you for being with us tonight. Nice of you all to join us.